Hey, this is Carrie with Canary Quilts, and we are starting week 2 of the Dear Jane Quilt along. And if you watched any of the first few videos I did, you know that I'm using EQ8's Dear Jane add-on to print my blocks. I'm going to try to do mostly foundation paper piecing. And I'm going to be populating the chart that you see here. It's one of the files that you get with the Dear Jane add-on. And I'm going to link a video down below on how to populate this chart with your own videos. But what I want to do today is work on the blocks that we're going to be doing for this week, which is E10, I8, J1, K10, and TR-2. I want to recolor these blocks. I'm going to be using some pinks this week. Last week I did blue. These are some pinks that I pulled out for my blocks. And I want to color my blocks pink and put them into my chart right now to see, just to make sure that I'm happy with pink and where they go. I think I will be because I'm so early in the process. But if I learn how to do this early enough, I can do it each week. And then I can make sure that I'm not, say, putting some pinks together or blues together again in the future. So what I've done is I've gone up to my block libraries, which is up here at the top. I've gone to the center blocks and I've started with, we're going to have E10, and I went to E10, which is this one right here, and I clicked on it, opened it, and then before I colored it, I added it to our sketchbook. So you could see what our sketchbook looked like before. The sketchbook looked like before we colored it. So it's got the same coloring in it again right now, but I'm going to change the color. So I've chosen a pink that's similar to my colors right here. I'm just using colors. I'm not using fabrics. And I'm going to use the spray can because each of these blocks are only 2 colors, and I want to recolor all the brown with pink. So I'm just going to take my spray can over to the brown, click it, and now I've got pink in all those colors. And now I can add it to the project sketchbook. So you can see right here is my pink coloring. It added a no color, and then I've still got my brown. So I can actually delete these right now. It doesn't delete it from the block library. It only deletes it from the sketchbook. So yes. And I want to get rid of the drawing, and let's get rid of the brown so we aren't getting confused with the different colors. So if we want to go to the next one, color that pink. I double click it, open it, still on spray can, hit it, and there we go. So that's how easy it is to recolor your blocks, add it to the sketchbook, and then you've got your blocks in there to use when we put it into our chart. So I'm going to quickly get all of these recolored, and then I'm going to come back to my chart. All right, here's my sketchbook filled with the blocks we're working on this week in pink. So now I can close out of here, go back up here to my quilt work table, and start populating. So I've got E10. Let's go and put that one in E10. And then this one is I8. So that's going to go there. We've got J1. It's going to go here. K10 there. And this is TR-2. So those are the blocks I'm working on. Those are the colors I've chosen this month or this week, and this is where they're going in the quilt. So I don't see anything that bothers me about that. So now I can go back and open these up in our block work table and print out the FPPs, the foundation paper piecing, or templates, whatever we need to use. So let's go through these quickly. This I'm going to use FPP, foundation paper piecing. So let's print on foundation, preview, and you can move these around, and then we can print these out. Even print it out in pink, so you know that that's where the pink goes. There we go. That gives us a little bit of space, so let's print that out. All right, let's go to another block. Let's do I-8. I want a foundation paper piece. This one also. Preview, make sure it's all on the paper. It is. I can print that. And then let's go here to J1. And this is going to be applique. So I want to print templates. And the preview for the templates is, this is our 5-inch square, which we don't need it as a template. And then this is our diamonds in the corners and our square in the middle. So I'm going to print this out. Next block is going to be K10. This is another one that I will foundation paper piece. So let's print that out, but let's look at it first. We could probably spread these out, give ourselves a little bit more paper when we're cutting. There we go. So we can print this out. And our last block is E10, and this is going to be applique. So we want to go to print and export our templates, take a look at it, we'll preview it. You really only need one of those, I guess, so I could delete that and just do 2 of these, and then you can either use the square as a template or you can measure it and cut some squares out. So let's print this. All right, I have everything printed. Let's go back to the quilt work table. So I'm just going to leave these in here for now, and when I finish these up and I take pictures of them, I'm going to import my pictures, get them ready, and put them in place here. And like I said, I do have a video on how I did that. I will have a link to that and the whole Dear Jane series playlist that I have on YouTube for you. That'll be linked down below. And if you're new here, I do have the EQ8 software and Dear Jane add-on link down below. But anyway, let's go over to my sewing machine and let's put these beautiful blocks together. All right, to get started on our week 2 Dear Jane, I have shown you how I'm doing these and printed out my pattern. So I'm going to start with E10. It's called 5 and dime. I need 2 dark squares, 2 light squares. And then I have cut out my template, which I have transferred over to my Steam-A-Seam Light 2, Steam-A-Seam 2 Light, Light Steam-A-Seam 2, I think it's called, because I need 2 dark appliques here. So what I need to do first is put these into a 4-patch, like that. And then I need to transfer my applique to my pink. I just wrote dark. At the time I wasn't sure what color I was using. And then I can add the appliques on here to the light. So let me get my 4-patch made. I am going to iron towards the pink so that I get nested seams in the middle. All right, there's my 4-patch. And it measures what it should measure. But one thing I did that's super important is I cut on the outside line. I need to cut on the sewing line for my template. So I need to recut this and then redraw it out, and then I'm gonna put it onto my fabric. So when I put mine on, I put it on for about 3 seconds, and that adheres it to the fabric, and then I can pull the paper off and put it on here. But you need to follow the directions of whatever fusible webbing you may be using. All right, I just need to redraw these. What a big difference. All right, I put my fusible on the back of my pink fabric. Now I can just pull the paper off, and let's see, it doesn't go quite to the corner. So let's put the corner pointed there, but not in the corner, and make sure your other point is towards this corner. It is not an exact science. And there we go. I'm going to fuse these down, and at a later time I am going to applique these. I still haven't figured out what I want to do yet, so I'm going to get these ironed. All right, here's my E10 5 and dime finished. I will applique at a later time. I want to do the second applique in this batch of blocks for week 2, and that's J1, Josepha's Jonquil, it's called. I need a background block, which I have cut. And then here is going to be the color of my applique. Here's my applique pieces that I cut out. And I need to cut these on the sewing line since I'm going to be appliquing them on. And I need 4 of the diamonds and 1 square. All right, I've transferred my templates onto my fusible, put my fusible on my colored fabric, and now I want to cut these out. I need to find the center of my block and then we can get these laid out. All right, I've got my pieces cut and I went over to my iron, folded my background piece in quarters and then creased it so I know where the centers are, or where the center is, and then I'll be able to lay my pieces out. So we want it to look like this. So again, not an exact science. I am going to peel the papers off, and it doesn't go square, it goes with the corners lined up with the creases. Each corner lines up with a crease. All right, there's that one. And then we take our diamonds and I'm just gonna place them so that they're pointing towards the center of my square and pointing at the corner. And I'm gonna do my best to make sure everything looks about the same. There we go. How's that look? I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to get this ironed down and you can label it and I will applique it at a later date. Okay, here's my J1 Josepha's Jonquil. I'm going to put that with my other one. So next we're moving on to I8 Pete's Paintbox. This is a paper piece. I have put down some dimensions of what I cut that should fit these, but I will let you know if they do or not before I tell you what they are. So I've got these cut. The big red ones are for this outside. The little red ones are for the inside and over here. The little white triangles are in here. This is the center. And then these strips go on the outside. So I'm gonna start with the center and see how my pieces, how I did cutting my pieces. And then I'll do one of these. All right, so they have A1 and A2. It doesn't really matter, but I'm going to turn this over and I'm going to trace my A1 and my A2 so that I know what kind of coverage I need. So I'm going to reverse it. I'm going to make my center square A1 and my triangle A2 because it really doesn't matter at this point. And one thing, the other thing that I like about this is, to be honest, is once you start ironing towards the pieces you're putting on. And if we do A1 and A2 as the middle, we'll be ironing towards the middle. But if I reverse it and make the middle A1, this triangle A2 will iron towards A2, and then we will be ironing towards all of these. So they'll all be ironed in the same direction. That's my thinking. All right, let's get back to this side. Let's put our stitch down low. Let's make sure I've got coverage all the way around and that I've got about a 1/4 inch coverage over my seam line. I want to line these up and I want my point to be lined up with this point. Looks like I'm going to have plenty of coverage, but I just want to make sure. So you can pin this in place. This is the line we want to sew on. Okay, here's my seam. I only sewed right from this point to this point, and I did a lock stitch on each side, or you can do a back stitch. And then we want to iron towards this top piece. All right, A3 is another one of these pink triangles. So I'm going to fold this over, grab my add a quarter, trim, and then I'll take another one of these pink triangles, line it up so that my points, I'm basically eyeballing my points, making sure they're in line. And now we are going to sew on this line. There's my seam, and I'm going to iron towards my purple triangle. And one thing you can do is hold up this side to some light, and you can see your fabric through the paper and make sure you've got coverage around all your seams here. All right, A4 is actually right here. So let's trim that one up. And that's what these are. And again, I'm going to put it in here, and I'm going to line my points up. You can line it up down here too. And sew on this line. There's my seam. I'm going to iron towards my triangle. All right. I'm going to make an adjustment. Yes, I did already. Okay. I think the piece I should have cut should be a little bit bigger. All right, so now that was A4. Now we're going to go to A5, which is this pink. And that's how we're going to do it. We're just going to keep looking for the next number and adding our pieces on. So I'm going to get this finished up. Basically kind of going to go in a circle here and show you what it looks like and let you know how my pieces turned out. So A5 is this line right here is where I'm going to sew. All right, there's the center section of my I-8 Pete's paint box, and I did pretty good trying to figure out what I needed. For these outer triangles, I cut a 3.5 inch square, and then I cut it on the diagonal both ways, and that's how I got all 4 triangles out of one block. I think a 3-inch square would work also, but 3.5 gives you plenty. You can see a 3-inch is right here, 3.5 is down here. Then for these white triangles, a 3-inch square cut on the diagonal both ways again will give you 4 out of 1 square. And then these triangles right here, I did a 2 3/4 inch cut on the diagonal both ways. So you only need 1 square and you get all 4 triangles, and then this is a 1 3/4 inch center. That's not too hard to figure out. All right, so I'm going to trim that up when I get done with everything. But let's see how these corners go together. Are all exactly the same. So I'm going to do one and see how I do. So we've got a short strip, a long strip, and a triangle. So I'm going to take a short strip. That's my outside. And that's my seam line right here between the two. And then this is the other seam line. So I marked this outside line, this line, and this line. I need to put this first one on and make sure I've got coverage here in my lines, and I do, and I've got coverage on all my outside lines. So now I'm going to take my triangle, and it's going to go, we want it to look like that, so we need to flip it over, and I'm going to line it up so that I have a 1/4 inch. So when I flip it over this way, I'll have a 1/4 inch coverage. Now hopefully that'll give me enough. So let me see. All right, I sewed right here, back stitched at this corner on that seam, and now we need to, whew, that is actually perfect. So I would do a 3-inch square I did 2 3/4 like I did in here, but I think you need a 3-inch. It would be a 3-inch square cut on both diagonals to give you 4 of these. So I am going to be pretty good on that, but I would want something bigger. All right, let's see how our long strip does. I need to iron that one. All right. So I'm just going to line this up, and I have room over here. This is where I need coverage. I need coverage out to there. So I have room to work to pull it this way. And here's the edge of my fabric. So now I'm going to sew on that line. All right, there's my corner, and it worked out pretty good. Like I said, I cut 2 3/4-inch square, cut on both diagonals. I would cut a 3-inch square, cut on both diagonals for these corner triangles. For the long strip, I used 1.5 by 3 1/4, and for the short strip, I used 1.5 by 2 1/2. So I am going to get all 4 corners done, and then we can come put this whole block together. All right, I finished the corners, and I have trimmed them all up on the outside line, not on the seam line. And we can now put our corners onto our center block. So we just want to start by putting opposite corners on. I am going to, since I trimmed these ends, whoops, I'm just going to line up these notches on each end here and then sew on the solid line. All right, here's I-8, my Pete's paint box, and all I did was put the opposite corners on, and then I ironed them open. Then I put the other 2 corners on, and I ironed them open. So my calculations worked. All right, there's Pete's paint box. Now we are moving on to, that was I-8, K10 Quandry. So I've gone through and kind of calculated up what I need here, and I think what I'm going to start doing is when I calculate something, I'm going to add a 1/2 inch to 1 inch just to be safe. I've got my pink pieces cut, and let's see, my pink squares are the squares you see here. This one long piece goes in the middle, and then all these triangles are all the triangles you see on the outside. And then my white pieces are, these 8 squares are all of these types of pieces on the outside. Then I have rectangles, which will be in the corners. And I have 1 2-inch square, which I cut on the diagonal, and that's going to be for these 2 triangles. So I'm going to get this cut up, and we can do a corner, we can do the middle, at least half the middle, and one of the sides here. All right, I've got my pieces cut. One thing I want to say is I did forget to cut this piece here. So that's what these are. I need 4 of these strips. So, because that's E1. I was going to start with this, and it's E1. So I was like, I don't have that piece. Anyway, let's start with the corner. E1, E2, E3, E4, E5. So we need these pieces. We're going to need these up here for the corners, and then the triangles. So let's start with E1. I'm going to mark this on the other side so I know what kind of coverage I need. Pretty much the edge. There we go. So E1 is this strip in the middle. We have plenty. So E2, let's get it so we have 1/4 of an inch over our line to E2. I'm going to take one of these triangles and just line it up, and I have plenty of coverage. So now I'm going to sew on this line right here. So lock stitch right there, and then sew through the seam allowance. There is my seam. Lock stitch there, I did a lock stitch on this seam and then went through the seam allowance. There's my first piece. So we want to turn it over. We want to go to E3, fold our paper back and trim, and you can see that I have plenty. All right, we are ready to put our other triangle right here. And I do have a front and a back to this fabric, so I've got to remember that. I am using the side of the fabric that has these gold stars, I guess. All right, so we're going to sew along E3. All right, there's my second triangle put on. Now we can move to E4, which is the shorter side of our square, our corner. Trim it up. Oops. And then it's basically this one right here. Or I think it's this one. Yeah, it's that one because I only need 4 of them. Line it up. So I need coverage here and here. And you can see I've got that coverage. So we're going to turn it over and sew on this line and do a lock stitch here and there. All right, here's my corner put on. I put a lock stitch there at that seam and there at that corner, and you can see I have plenty of coverage around it. So now we want to go to E5, the last part of our corner. Trim it up. And oops, we need the longer ones. And I need coverage, just so you can see, all the way out here. And as you can see, I will have it. So we can sew all the way across, lock stitching at these intersections of the seam. There we go. There's our first corner. The other 4 corners are going to be exactly the same as that. So I'm going to set that aside with the other 4 corners. And then I'm going to start working on this center piece. And this section right here is the same, or I'm sorry, this section right here is the same as this. So if you know how to do this, you know how to do those. All right, they want us to start in the middle. So we have A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, A6, A7. All right, so I'm going to turn this over. I need coverage for that center piece. And I pretty much need to go to the outside of this paper. There we go. I need my pink to cover in there. And I want to put it 1/4 inch over my A2, which is this side. Make sure I have coverage everywhere, and I do. My gold stars are up. Now we need our 2 white triangles here. And I'm just going to line it up. I've got a big enough triangle. So we're going to do a lock stitch here and go through the seam allowance. There is my first triangle. Turn it over, go to A3, and let's flip it and trim it. And we are going to take our other triangle. We only need 2 in the whole block. And line it up here. You can see that I need coverage there and all the way out to the side of the paper. And I've got plenty there to work with. So again, sew on the line, do lock stitches at the seam intersections, and iron towards the piece that we're putting on. All right, there's our first 3 pieces on, and you can see our fabric is outside of our paper, so we've got plenty of coverage for the seam lines. So let's turn it over. Let's go to A4, which is one of our 2-inch pieces. Trim it up. Grab my pink square. Make sure I've got the gold stars on the right side. So I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to line it up. And I need to get coverage out to here and the edges of the paper, and I've got plenty to work with. There's my number 4 piece. And let's flip it over. You can see I just went right across there and did lock stitches. Now we need to go to A5, which is the little pink triangle. Trim it up at 1/4 inch. Grab one of my pink triangles, make sure I've got the right sides. Line it up, and you can see I'm going to have plenty of coverage because I just need coverage to there and the outsides of the paper. So again, we can go all the way across, lock stitching at our seam intersections. All right, there's my triangle put on. Now we get to do A6 and A7. So let's start with A6 and trim it up. And that's what I have these squares for. There's 8 of them in the entire block. So these are going to be plenty big. I wanted to make sure I had enough this time. So I need coverage over this, basically the edge of the paper. And I am going to have it. So again, start here, or at least lock stitch here and at this seam right there. There we go. We had plenty to work with. Guess we probably could do a little smaller. Okay, so A7, last piece I'm going to show you. Trim it up. Use the same 2-inch piece over here. And again, we just need coverage over that entire paper corner. Sew on the line, lock stitch at seam intersections. And there we go. So this other half is exactly like this half. So I'm going to and these are exactly the same. So I'm going to finish all of this up, and if I remember correctly, we're just going to have a 9 patch to put together. So I'm going to finish my paper piecing and get everything trimmed up. All right, I want to show you what K10 Quandry looks like. That's the block we're going for. So the corners do matter. All these corners, their center strip is going the same direction. So you can see that if you put these in the wrong corner, they wouldn't be in the same direction. So let's just switch these around. There we go. These strips are all in the same direction. So we need to put these rows together and then add them to this row. So I'm going to get that done. I'm going to iron my seams open, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. All right, there are the 4 center pieces. This is K10 Quandry that I just did. You know what I think I'll do is I'll go out on my website. I have a link down below in the description, and I'll put the dimensions I used for paper piecing if that helps you out. And then you can go from there on what you want to do with your dimensions, but I'll put the dimensions on my website just for paper piecing. That's it. All right, now we are on to our TR-2 top row triangle. All right, we're on to T2 Australian Pines. This is our paper pieces right here. I'm going to use these outer pieces as templates, and that is a template also. I've got my pieces cut, hopefully to what I need. So what I have is I have my white pieces here for my paper piece, and I need 8 of them. I just made them all the same size. I've got, for the red strips, I've got 6 of them, and then these 2 corners down here are right here. And then this is a template, or a piece just cut so I can cut a template out of it. These are the long strips that I'll cut templates out. So I think I've added enough for our paper piecing, so I'm going to get started here. I'm just going to do this side of our paper piecing right here, because this side will be just like that one. And then we can put the whole thing together. So let's see how I did with my sizes. Let's flip it over. And our first piece is down here, and we need coverage here. And there's the bottom, here's the side, and then there's the next piece. So our first piece is these 2. and I want to cover with 1/4 inch over this line right here. And I have coverage everywhere else. My lines that I drew are all covered. All right, so the next one's going to be this white piece. I'm just going to lay it here. And I have plenty, so when I flip, I'll have coverage here and I'll have coverage here. So let me get this sewn, see how I did. All right, there we go. So you can't see any of the lines I've drawn, which is good. And you can't see it, but my line right here, well, you can right here. I have plenty. I have more than 1/4 inch. So next one we're gonna do is turn it. We're gonna do A3. And from here on out, A3 to A8 is gonna be exactly the same. Our pieces that I'm using are gonna stay the same size. They're just gonna get progressively shorter as we go up. So there's A2. I'm gonna grab A3, which is this pile of 6, and do this. Show you my coverage. That's the coverage I need to have, and I'm gonna have plenty. And as we go up, it's gonna get shorter, so I'm not worried about coverage from here on out. All right, I just realized I didn't cut this piece, so I'm gonna get this piece cut, and then I am, at this point, I'm just gonna finish going up this side. It's gonna be exactly the same as what I've been doing, and then we'll come back, I'll have it cut, and we'll put it on. All right, I finished the first piece that I showed you. Well, I haven't put this piece on. Then I went ahead and did this side since it's exactly the same. And I cut my piece for A9. So what we need to do is trim it up, and then we can get this piece sewn on. All right, there's my piece put on. You can see I've got plenty of coverage. So now what I am going to do is I'm going to trim these up on the outside line, and I'm going to use these 3 pieces and cut my templates out to go on the outside. We need to do the top. I could put it this way. We need to do the top triangle here, and then these go along the edge. All right, here's all our pieces ready to put this TR-2 Australian pines together. So the first thing we need to do is sew these 2 together. And you want to line up this bottom edge. Then we're going to add our red point, at least, or pink point, whatever you want to call it, at the top. And then we are going to add these 2, and I've still got the paper on the back. I don't know if I'll use it when I put it on, but this is how they go so that these points meet at the top, and we'll have a straight edge at the bottom. So that's how I'm putting it together. Let's line up this point down here, and then line up the edge. Sew along the line, and I will probably iron this open. That seems to be what I'm doing with these pieces. All right, there's my bottom put together, and now let's take our top and just line that up, and we can sew that together. And I think I'm going to iron towards my triangle at the top. All right, there's my center section. All we have left is to put these sides on, and I'm thinking what I want to do is line up this point here, these 2 points. I am going to do that. I will let you know how that works out. I hope I don't have to rip it out. So yeah, let's try that. All right, before I started sewing, I changed my mind. What I did was I lined it up down here at the bottom. At least with my templates that were cut out, there's like a notch here and a notch here that fits, but I put a pin through this corner right here, and it came out in this corner. So you want to line it up from the bottom and work your way up, and it should work out that way. All right. All right, I found out something interesting. These 2 end pieces are not the same size. You can see one is shorter than the other, which means I need to put this one on first and then this one. I am not going to rip this whole thing out. I'm only going to rip out to about right there. I'm going to add this piece on, just like I added this one. I'm going to add it on. I am going to iron towards the outside, and then I'm going to come back and sew this section on. So I'm not taking the whole thing out. I'm just going to take the top inch or, yeah, probably inch. All right, I've ripped out just this top part. Now I'm going to add this side on, just like I did down here, lining it up, putting the pin through this point, making sure it comes out the other side and the point, and then sewing it on. All right, so I will admit that I started putting this together. The shorter side is D section, the longer side is E section. If I would have followed my alphabet, I would have done it right, but I didn't. So don't do what I did. Follow the alphabet when putting this together, and it'll go together just like it should. So now I'm going to finish sewing this back on from where I stopped. Well, there's my Australian Pines TR-2. If I were to be doing this over again, I would not cut this off. I would put it straight to a point so you have more to work with when joining these two. Mine has a little bit of jankiness to it. It's gonna work, but I had to rip it out a couple times to get my two pieces to meet at the top. So it would have been easier if I'd left the point on this. So that's my takeaway here. All my other pieces worked, and I will put those on my website. I think I'll start doing that just for paper piecing. Just the pieces that I use for paper piecing, and then you can decide if you want to use them or not. So, but if you're using EQ8, you're printing these out, I would leave the point. So there you go. That was a little harder than I was expecting. And it was just this point right here that gave me some issue. All right, we are done with week 2. All right, that's a wrap for week 2. We got 2 applique pieces and 3 paper pieces. The applique pieces go together really quick. And then the paper pieces, these 2 weren't too bad. This one, like I said, the top gave me a problem, and I told you not to cut the tip off. If you're using EQ8 templates, don't cut the tip off of this top piece right here. And then I showed you how I did the sides. I'm learning as I'm going too, so I hope I'm kind of teaching you and letting you know the mistakes I made. And I am also putting out on my website the pieces I use for paper piecing, like the cut pieces. If you want to use those, you want to try them, you want to use those as starting points for yourself. I am cutting a little bigger just so I know I have coverage. So I am doing that from now on. So you can make your own decision. You can see what I'm doing and make your own decision. Anyway, I have the link to my website down below, and the links to EQ8, links to Dear Jane add-on. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button, notification bell, and watch us put this quilt together or join us. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye.